Good afternoon, all. It's another sunny day here in London. I've changed the scenery for today, so I'm sitting in a lovely park. Um, it's not quite locked down at the moment. There's still a few people running around and enjoying the sun. And I'm just sitting on the bench, just enjoying the weather. So, what better time to tuck into chapter 2 of Doing Business by the Good Book by David L. Steward. Chapter 2 is on integrity, and this is another great chapter from the billionaire David Steward. Now, jumping into it, he takes an excerpt from Proverbs 22:1, saying, "A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favour is better than silver or gold." Now, again, I've taken some notes on this chapter. I thought it was really, really good. Integrity is something which isn't often discussed, I find, in business. And what I like about it is that this chapter, he says, you can't be trusted if you break your word. Your word is everything in life and in business. And if you give your word to someone, you should follow through on what you've promised them. And if you keep breaking your word, then people will just lose confidence in you. If you say you're going to get back to someone by a certain date, or if you say you're going to honour a refund and you go back on your word, then not only do people don't like it, that will get around with other customers, and you'll get a bad reputation, whether it's bad reviews on Trustpilot or Google, or people just won't use you. They'll know you as the person or the business that keeps breaking their word and doesn't follow through on their promises. So that's a really good thing to remember, is if you give your word and mean it. Don't give it lightly as well. So don't commit to things which you can't deliver. Always commit to things which you can deliver, and you wouldn't have any problems if you stick to that. So he continues on to say that we're ambassadors of God, both inside and outside of business. Now, I love this bit. When I read it, I was just blown away, because a lot of the personal development books I've read, they've tried to keep business and their personal lives separate. But when you think about it, it's very difficult to do that if you're running a business, especially a big business, because you spend a lot of your time in the business and you're dealing with people, with human beings at the end of the day. So how you separate your business and personal life is very difficult, because interacting with people is a personal thing. So he really stresses this, that you cannot keep them separate. You cannot have one set of values for your business and another set of values for yourself. So to simplify this, you can't be ruthless in business, but a wonderful person, a generous person in your personal life. They just don't work together. And he goes on to say that he believes he's doing God's work, so he won't lower his standards. So even though the temptations are there in business to cut corners, to make the most out of other people's disadvantages, or, for example, in this situation, charging more to people who can't get hold of supplies, he says really that's something which is unethical, and is something which he wouldn't do. He wouldn't do that in his personal life. So why should he feel that he can get away with it in business? Just because you're running a business, it doesn't mean that you can carry out all of these unethical acts. You can't behave a certain way in the name of business or in the name to make a profit. It's not a good enough excuse to say, well, I need to make a profit, so I'm going to rip people off. And especially with David Steward, it's quite interesting. He really honestly and truly believes he's doing God's work. And it reminds me of a book I read called Titan, which is about the biography of John D. Rockefeller. And he believed himself that he was doing God's work, and he was obsessed. He was a fanatic about his work. And it seems like David Steward also has the same approach to his work, and he doesn't separate God from his work. It's very much entrenched in everything that he does. Now, going on to another note which I made, he says a customer once overpaid his company $1 million, and he said that they could have easily concealed this within their books. But being the man that he is, a man of faith, a man of God, he repaid the customer the full amount, and that's something which you don't hear too often. So it was really, really refreshing to see something like that, to read something like that, where $1 million is not a dollar. It's a huge amount of money, and to even say that it could have been hidden, but he repaid every single penny back in full. That's amazing. That is something which is if you're the person who's overpaid that money, you will look at David Steward and be like, wow, this is someone who we can trust. We know that if we overpay this guy accidentally, if we make a mistake, that he's going to come back to us and say, look, you've overpaid here, and perhaps you could help them in the future to stop making those overpayments. So think about, in your own business, what does that do for you? What sort of trust, what sort of relationship does that create with your customers? If they can rely on you, not to take advantage of them, that is better than any marketing campaign, any discount in the prices that you offer them. They will always remember the time that they overpaid you and you said, look, here's your money back. He likens this to the time when Jesus was wandering 40 days in the desert, and basically saying that there's always temptation to do the wrong thing, and the devil gave Jesus so many temptations. He tempted him so much to do the wrong thing, but Jesus was steadfast in what he believed in, and he didn't give in. Now, moving on further into the chapter towards the latter stages, he says, David Stewart says, a person's reputation is based on whether one keeps his or her word. So that's going back to the earlier point of the importance of keeping your word in business and in life. They're not separate. So keep your word in business and in life, and you won't have any problems there. And lastly, he ties up the chapter by saying that it's so important the way he behaves as a CEO, and it's so important how his senior managers behave, because senior managers especially, they have to conduct themselves with integrity. They have to, David Steward, he would set the vision for the company, but really it's the senior managers who are there day in, day out. Now, if they're showing integrity, then the managers beneath them will also show integrity. But if they're cutting corners, being unethical, taking advantage of customers and whatnot, then, what do you think the managers will do? So he says it's very important that he, as a CEO, sets the benchmark for standards, and that he is the role model, so that his senior managers can observe that and enact the same thing. And obviously other staff lower down the chain will also see that and do the same thing. And he concludes by saying that the future of the business really depends on what's done today. So it's not what you do in the future, it's what you do today. How do you treat your customers today? How do you, just do business today? Because that is what will be remembered tomorrow, and long after David Steward passes away, his business will still be there, and a lot of the clients will hopefully still be there, and from the sounds of it, they will, because of the sort of ethic that David Steward instills in the business. The religious aspect he instills in the business. It's likely that they will all all of his clients will still be there, because they'll remember that this was a man who took his business very seriously, that this was a man who served others and gave his word and always followed through on his word. So as we close up this chapter, I really like this chapter. For me, the most groundbreaking thing was, not separating between business and pleasure. And to me, that is, business and your personal life. And to me, that is something which I've never heard before. I always used to think that you separate the two, but, you're on this world, you have one life to live, and you can't create those boundaries to justify your actions. How you are is the way you are, and that should be reflected in everything that you do. Because what's better, to live a life of consistency, or to live a life where you're constantly adjusting yourself to whichever situation you're in? Of course, you need to adapt from time to time, but your values should stay the same. And obviously, as you grow, your values will change, but your values should be reflected in everything you do. If you're a generous person, continue to be a generous person. You'll be blessed for it. So don't feel like you have to act a certain way in business. And I've even heard the same thing in the past couple of weeks. Don't feel that you have to be a certain way in the company. People will appreciate you more if you're yourself, rather than trying to be someone else. So with that, I would like to say thank you for joining me. This is my second, review of this book, in terms of obviously chapter 2, and I'm still getting used to this format of recording myself, so excuse my nervousness and sort of breaks in concentration. Hopefully the forthcoming episodes will be a lot smoother, but I really hope you do get some value out of this. And if you've read this chapter, if you've read this book, then please let me know what you think, and if you're also along the same lines of my thinking. And I'd also be interested to hear if you have any different interpretations of what I've read today. All right, until next time, have a great day.